Hello guys, welcome back to the Beastie Room. Now, in the last few videos, we've done the last few rehouses. We've been touching on some of the plants and bits and pieces that we use in our enclosures. And one of the reasons that we use the plants, not only because they actually make an enclosure look really nice, and I like the natural look, that's, above everything else, that's really, really nice. But it also helps us to maintain the humidity within our enclosures. Now, that being said, we can't use plants in everything. And it got me thinking, basically, I mean, as you can see on the table here now, we have got an array of different things. I just literally threw in all sorts of things that, people use in the hobby to actually house their spiders, depending on what they are. Obviously size makes a difference. You're not going to get a giant sturmy in a pill pot, are you? So we got to everything is size relative to how we do it. But that also brings back another problem, which it seems to be that an awful lot of beginners, new people to the hobby, get really, really caught up with, and some old hands as well, to be fair. It's something I often see being asked on the forums and in the different groups, and I get countless messages about this very, very subject. And I'll be honest, it's driving me mad, absolutely mad. So I thought, let's try and clarify how I see it and what I do with our stuff. Now, the big thing that everything in common here with all of these enclosures is about when you see stuff on the internet and like on care sheets and things like this, especially with humid loving spiders, the common theme, people say, how often should I spray my enclosure? So they come back with all the answers, don't they? Once, twice a week, 3 times a week sometimes. If you've got a real water loving person out there, they're spraying every day. It's not really necessary, is it? So why are people coming back with this information? So it's really, really confusing, especially if you're new. So I think what we're going to try and do, we're going to look at all the different enclosures, and then we're going to look at how we manage our water. So what I want you to do, I'd like you all to try and sit back and think about changing the way you think about the water that you use. So ideally, what are we using water for? What do we need it for? Why are we spraying enclosures? Well, the main thing is because everywhere in the internet tells you about humidity loving spiders requiring a high humidity. Spraying your enclosure does not give it a high humidity that will last any length of time. So first off, there's your first false statement, if you like. Spraying, all that does is soak everything, which is rather uncomfortable. I can only imagine if I came and sprayed you a couple of times a day, you would soon get fed up with me. You'd get the ump. And what it does in a lot of these enclosures, the water that you're putting in there does not evaporate fast enough. So by that I mean every time you add more water to it, you're building a higher water content within your enclosure. And every one of these enclosures here that you can see on the table, every one of them, all of these, they all act very, very differently, and they all hold on to their moisture content very, very differently. So if we, for argument's sake, imagine that all of our enclosures here have got an adequate depth of substrate. So depending on what we're looking at, this is a good example. If I put this one on the front here, this one here, this is our gold wafer. And this is like half filled with soil, which is enough for this particular species. And most species, if we half fill the enclosure, we can maintain a reasonable amount of moisture within that soil, because we've got a large body of soil which will hold on to that moisture. It will keep it. So that in itself says that we don't need to actually water as often as you may first think. Now, that also being said, we have to think about the substrate that we're using. If you are using pure cocoa fibre, it don't matter what you put it in, it will dry out relatively fast. It does. It just evaporates really, really quick. If you mix that with topsoil, it will last a little bit longer. So if you've done a 50-50 mix of the two, you're probably going to almost double the time that your soil will hold that water. If you put, say, 2/3 of compost and 1/3 of cocoa fibre, it's going to last even longer. So you see, each different substrate has a different value and a different way of holding on or letting go of its moisture. So we'll go on that in a little bit, in a moment. So if we work out that all of our enclosures, like, I like these guys here, these are our cereal tubs, nothing fancy. It's a cereal tub that we have butchered to make useful. Now, what we do with these, if we fill these up to sort of like here with soil, yeah, so that's like what, 20% of that has got soil, and we use these for our arboreal spiders. If we were to keep a fossorial like that wafer, the gold wafer there, we would fill this up to here, and it would be very, very easy to maintain moisture within this soil. And that is because there is no ventilation around the bottom here. We have a bit of ventilation in the top, and we have it on the other side as well. And we sometimes, but not always, this lid hasn't. This lid has got no ventilation in the lid. But sometimes, depending on the species that we put in here, we may put ventilation in the lid as well. Now, with ventilation in the sides like this, it doesn't breathe as well as if we put holes in the top as well. If we put holes in the top, the warmth and the moisture coming up inside this plastic box, and believe you me, it will sweat. The moisture coming up will go out of these top holes quicker than it will going out the side. And that is purely because heat and moisture rises. So the quickest way out is anything up above. So if you've got ventilation in the top, like for argument's sake, like one of these, we often see these. You can buy these at your pet shops, at the shows, with fruit flies in them. And I love these pots. I use a lot of these pots for different things. These are great for growing on juvies and things like that. But these have got a mesh lid, a mesh circle cut into the lid.
Can you tilt it a little for this?
Yeah. So they got this mesh in the top. Now we've also got holes in the sides that go all the way around. So now if we filled this up to, say, 1/3 full with soil, and then put our spider in there, if it was a fossorial spider, we might fill it, 2/3 of the way up. But the point is, any moisture in here is going to stay in here, but this mesh top here is going to allow for this to dry out quicker than this one that's got nothing in the top. You see? So it's very, very important that we understand how each enclosure works.
So as much as type of substrate depth is the depth, how much?
The depth will make a difference as well, yeah. We will come to that. We will come to that. Now, when we're looking at these are a very, very popular thing at the moment. You can buy these. These are sling pots. They've got the little bit opening there so you can pop your food in and stuff like that. Now, these pots in themselves are great for slings, especially dry loving slings, things that like, terrestrial things like young brackies, stuff like that. They will do well in these. So even with this ventilation in the side, now this isn't one of my pots, this is one that has come in through a collection or whatever, and someone has put holes down the side, and they've got holes down this side as well. Now you might sit and think to yourself, wow, that's a lot of ventilation in that pot. That ventilation is absolutely worthless. It is not going to do anything whatsoever. You are not going to get any ventilation in this pot with them tiny, tiny little holes like that. They're just not going to be workable. They're not going to work. You can see how tiny they are. So they are probably been put in by a pin or something. And I think actually, I think some of these you can buy them pre-hole, you know, with holes in them already. But this ventilation, although you look at that and you think you've got ventilation, you haven't got ventilation. That is not going to work. It really isn't. So if we were to put a little bit of soil in here, say half fill this, and keep a very young brachy sling or grammostola sling, something like that, they will do well in these because they're dry. And then all we would need to do is tip a tiny, tiny little bit of water in a corner so that we just get one little corner damp. Now that dampness in that corner, we just keep an eye on it. And as soon as we see the colour change, we top it up again. And we just do it like that.
What about water bowl?
Yeah, we can have a water bowl. We can put a tiny, tiny little water bowl. Many of our very small slings, we don't put water bowls in. So we let them use their food and we let them gain moisture from a small, you know, corner in the thing. You're only looking at 10% of the overall area to be moist. Very, very small amount. Now, if you're using, like for your slings, you've got a sling pot, which are these things here. We often use these. Now, whether we're using arboreal or terrestrial or fossorial spiderlings, we quite often fill these up 3/4 full.
It's hard otherwise, isn't it?
Yeah, so we fill them up 3/4 full, and in that way we can try and keep them moist. The big thing with these, if you go a little bit over and you end up with wet soil, you're probably going to kill your sling. It won't like it. It'll be all right for a day or so, but it won't like it. If you go the other way and they dry out, you'll probably lose your sling as well. So these are very, very hard to maintain unless you are actually staying on the ball and you're visiting these daily almost. They're very, very difficult to maintain. So another thing, you know, bear it in mind. We often see these. These, I actually like these. These are these like specimen jars.
I prefer them too.
And they're really nice. So we've got different sizes. So even for a tiny sling, this wouldn't be a bad size. It would give it a bit of room. But more importantly, what it does is it gives you a little bit more freedom and a little bit, you know, scope in which to play around with your water. Because this is the important thing with all of these things. Water is the key. Water is the difference between life and death with many of these enclosures. So we've got ventilation in the top, but we've got no ventilation in the sides. Now I can hear many of you screaming out, oh my God, there should be ventilation everywhere. Forget all this stuff. This is, it's such a thing that's gone on in the hobby for so long now. And hopefully we can try and kick it out there a little bit and try and show people that about, you know, ventilation and moisture are two separate things. And then the big sticking point in the middle is our enclosure, our choice of enclosure, because it makes the world of difference to how we want to do what we want to do. So again, we've got these. You'll see these everywhere. You'll see these at the show. These are deli cups. These are the tall ones. We use these a lot for juvies and things like that. This makes a brilliant arboreal thing just as it is. There is room enough in one of these to be able to glue a water bowl in here. So you'll often see in our enclosures, we will actually glue a water bowl. So it's like that, and we will glue our water bowl to the side of the bark, just like so. And that is enough. Now, if we were to do that in this enclosure, we would have, for an arboreal spider, we would have about so much soil in there. Put as much soil as you can physically get away with in here, because your soil is what you're going to use to regulate your humidity. You're not going to spray this. I'll give you an example. If I show you this, I've got my spray gun here. Right. Can we see this now? Right.
I think so.
This is our enclosure here. Our spider is hiding down here, and we went on the internet and asked people's advice, and they all turned around and said, spray a couple of times a week. Well, if I spray this tub now, yeah,
it's just one burst.
that is one little burst. And can you see just how wet
Quite difficult.
that whole thing is? And you will see the water is running down that plastic. Yeah?
Hold it in front of your t-shirt.
Hold it in front of my t-shirt. There you go.
Yeah, I think we get the gist.
Yeah? Now the piece of wood is thing. Now look at that. That was one spray. Now watch down on the table here and you'll see this now. Yeah? This is all the water that's coming out. And that's just where we've left it for a couple of seconds. So as you can see there, by spraying this, you have literally given the whole environment a tsunami effect. You've absolutely soaked the whole thing, and your spider is now going to get a massive spike because the only ventilation we've got is in the lid, which is a couple of holes here. This, to all intents and purposes, is a sealed plastic pot. The humidity is going to go boom, sky high. Our spider's going to sit there and be like, oh, it's hot in here. You know what I mean? He's going to really, really feel it. And he is going to sit uncomfortable now until this dries out, which might be 11, 12, 24 hours, depending on how much of a spray you put in there.
And how hot it is.
And how hot it is, yeah. If you're like us and you have a warm room, it will cause even more problems because this will just sweat. It's not a good idea. Not a good idea. If you'd done the same thing in this enclosure, it would dissipate quicker, but it's still not a good idea. We want to come away from spraying, especially in the plastics and things like that.
Why would it dissipate quicker in that? They're both plastic. Is it because of the holes in the side?
It's got holes in the side, but it's also got this mesh top. So
right.
This mesh breathes a lot better than drilled holes.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Yep.
It will go. And what you will find is with these, if it's in a warm room, you'll find droplets of water sitting on the top. If you're seeing droplets of water sitting on the top, which is condensation, you have well overdone it. I would seriously take that lid off and leave it sitting out with the lid off and let it dry out a bit. You'll probably see condensation on the sides. Even if your spider is in there, get a bit of tissue, just wipe around the sides, wipe the lid off. Try and sop up some of that moisture because you have well overdone it. It's got way too much. There is no spider out there that I know of that actually likes that kind of, massive humidity spikes like that. Nothing. Now another popular one are these bra plast. So we got these. We use these quite a lot. They're ideal for some of the small stuff. They're great for growing things on. We can fill them right up, almost 2/3 of the way up. We can fill them with soil. In terms of ventilation, all they've got is holes in the top, like here. You see them?
Put it up a bit. That's it.
Yeah, you see them holes? They've got 2 in there and 2 at the other end.
Yep.
So if you've got very, very small things, be careful because slings and things will crawl straight out of them holes. But anything juvie sized, they're absolutely ideal. Now these are ideal for many of the, for pretty much anything really, as long as you monitor how you want to use your water. It's very, very important. So then we come on to things like the glass enclosures. Now we've got a Komodo here, which has got no side ventilation whatsoever. We'll come back to that one in a minute. This has got no side ventilation. And then we've got the Exoterra, which has got front ventilation down in the door. Yeah? Both of them have mesh tops.
Yep.
You see them? So they've both got full mesh tops. Now we like our mesh tops. We keep our mesh tops. Never have any trouble with them. They're absolutely fine. Now, with these enclosures, they both behave very, very differently when it comes to humidity. So how we use our water in them has to be tailored to each individual enclosure. In our room, like we said, it's quite warm. So we can soak our soil. We use these ones here a lot for our fossorial spiders. So we can fill them up sort of 2/3 of the way. Excuse me. We can fill them up 2/3 of the way, gives them plenty of soil. They can burrow down, and then we can just maintain that soil. Now with these, the exos, we use these more for things like our boreal spiders. Now you will see in my room and some of our previous videos, I will go around and I will open up all of these doors, and I go around with my sprayer, and I spray these enclosures, and I water the plants, and I do all the bits and pieces with them. Now the reason I can get away with that in my room is because the style of the enclosure that I'm using allows for it. It allows for it to dissipate really quickly. The warmth in my room helps with that as well. So these are all things that you need to do. So spraying in these enclosures is not such a big deal. It's not a bad idea at all. And it can be useful. But these are very, very well ventilated.
So there's a lot more space for there to be that wet area and dry area.
Also, yes, yeah, you've got a much bigger space. And obviously the bigger your enclosure, the larger your enclosure becomes, the more freedom you have with what you're doing. And this is the key. You know, with many of these things here, we are talking of very, very small things. So our freedom is a lot less. We just haven't got the what's the word? The room for mistakes. We can't afford mistakes. If we put a little bit too much water in any of these types things, we are now in trouble, because it's very difficult for us to actually change it and do anything with it. Now another one firm favourite are these really useful rubs. Now these, I like these. Again though, I prefer these for things like my drier species. So with these, we've got holes in the side. Also, you'll notice, if you look at the lid, you've got these veins in the lid, and they sit, that part of the box sits on top of them veins, which means there is an airflow gap all the way around the edge.
They're not airtight.
All the way, so they are not airtight. Also, if you've got small spiders, they will walk out of one of these. They'll get out. So they're only good for, you know, largest spiders really, if you want to keep them safely. So again, these are really useful, very much so for the drier species, not so much for the humidity species, because these dry out really, really fast.
Or they're just wet in sweat.
Well, they don't sweat so much because they've got such an airflow on them.
Okay.
They literally, it's almost like having an enclosure without a lid. There is so much that, especially in a warm room, as soon as you put water in there, it don't take long and it dries out. Now we can play around with substrates to try and make it keep moisture in there. We'll cover that in a moment. But generally speaking, these guys have so much airflow that they are really only really good for dry stuff, I've found anyway. We've also got these. These are another popular one that you see in the shows. And these are Chinese betta tanks, I think they're called. And believe it or not,
For Siamese fighters.
these are actually designed for Siamese fighting fish. Yeah, that's what they're marketed as anyway. But we won't go into that. These have got a top that is fully vented on the top as well. So again, we've got a glass enclosure, no side ventilation whatsoever, just the top ventilation, and it works perfectly well. I actually like these. I like the taller version of these. I use them for my males, and they work really, really well. So they're another nice, easy one. And another one that we often use, believe it or not, and you'll see these at the shows on our tables. We use these tubs to put our spiders in for the shows. Now these,
Just the side vent.
again, these have got holes all the way down. So these are literally plastered. The other side is exactly the same, and they also put some in the top as well. These will dry out. If you're not careful with them, they dry out quite quickly.
Can't put too much substrate in them either, can we?
No, you can't get away with a lot. This had a male Gabonensis in it, and this was absolutely ideal. This is like a forever home for a male Gabonensis. You don't need any more than that. He's perfectly happy in something like that. And you can see there we've got a water bowl in there for him. He's not in there at the moment, to be fair. And then all we would do with this is how I would like you to actually do your watering. When you're using small things like these tubs, any of these, anything really that's small, especially things that sweat, I use one of these. This is a tattooist bottle, and I use this for bringing my water in because it gives me a little bit more control. But if you look in here, what we can do, this spider likes it quite dry. So what we do, the substrate and everything is dry. I can squirt this in there like so. That's a full water bowl there now, right?
So he's got drinking water.
So he's got drinking water. And what we can do now is we can just overflow that. And you'll see it coming in down the side. And that is enough. That there...
Just like a little wet corner, isn't it?
Yeah, well that will soak that up. It will all get soaked up. And then what we've done there is we've covered maybe 10% of this enclosure has got a damp area. He will then spend his time underneath this bit of cork bark, or he'll be back here somewhere. But this here will give just enough humidity in there to keep him happy, because he's not an absolutely bone dry loving thing. He doesn't need it bone dry. But this is ideal. So this is what we're looking at. The same as when we got enclosures like these. If we've got a bit of soil in there, if I've got anything actually.
We can show with my wafer.
Here we go. Look. This is an empty one that's got nothing in it. Actually, that's quite interesting. This has got a little, very, very damp, the slightest bit of dampness inside this moisture in this soil. Yeah? And it's got that little bit of moss in there, which is holding moisture as well. But now, look on this. Can you see how damp that is?
Take your hands away.
Can you see that?
Yeah, don't move. Just you can see the fogging.
Yeah, slightly fogged. Yeah, so that will change as the temperature in the room changes. So like as we're filming at the moment, we've got the door open. So the temperature in here has dropped down a couple of degrees, which will make things go, especially in these sort of, it doesn't affect the glass, but it does this sort of thing. And they get that bit of misty going on. So you can see it literally there. I mean there, see if I run my finger up it now, you can see the difference.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, you see that? So it's quite incredible. So this was for an arbora. We had an orb weaver in here. And so when we want to put moisture in here, we want the barest amount. So what we're doing is we've got that little bit of moss in there. And all we want to do, if you focused on the moss. Yeah. All we want to do is, that is it. Hopefully you got to see that. That will soak up into that piece of moss. And then because of the enclosure, you can see already that it holds all that humidity in there. So we only need to put the barest amount in there to enable us to keep a reasonable humidity. If it gets any worse, we can always add a few more holes, or we can cut a hole out and we can buy the mesh discs and we can glue one of them in, which would be even better. They all work really, really well. Another thing that you'll often see on the fruit flies are these. So these have got a mesh in, these are full of holes, and they got mesh in them.
Can you show me? Thank you.
So they've got like a cloth. Now these are okay, and they do work well, and they do allow them to breathe a little bit. But many slings in that will actually chew through them, and they'll go walkabout. So bear that in mind. If you've got slings that don't chew about, then they're all right. But anything that's
likes to nibble,
likes to have a nibble, yeah, they'll be out of there. So as we've seen there, tiniest little dribble is all that needs.
And that's enough for drinking water as well?
Well, we can do that. They will often or not, spiders will go down and they will use the moss and they will drink from the moss. They'll take it up, especially small stuff. We're talking, when we're on little tubs like these, we're talking small spiders, not big spiders. We can still put a water bowl in here and we can fill the water bowl up and we can, you know, allow that. That will give us a certain amount of humidity. But the difference is with the water bowl, if it's holding the water, it will literally just sit there and it will evaporate. The actual environment itself will stay permanently dry. With a lot of these, by putting the moss in there and the soil in the bottom underneath, we are actually getting a little bit of moisture in that soil, which is giving us a nice environment rather than it being bone dry with just a water bowl. Yeah, so it's sort of different things to think about. But one of the big things is, it's too easy for people to say, you know, spray this, do that. Everything has to be tailored for the enclosure that you are using. Now, when we come to substrates, all of these different enclosures, we can alter the way they behave by the substrate that we use. So like we were saying earlier, if we use a pure cocoa fiber, that will stay, you know, that will dry out very, very quickly. And we can keep moistening it up, but we don't want to be doing that on a daily basis. That's too much. You know, we want something that's almost going to look after itself. So we can add potting compost, which will help to thicken it up a little bit. We can also add some topsoil in it, some peat, if you can still get hold of it, peat. There are peat products on the market that we can still use. These will all help to thicken it up and make it more substantial. We can also add in things like sphagnum moss, leaf litter, anything like that, which that will help to give more of an area to our actual substrate. Now, another thing that we have done a lot in the past, is we've used bark chippings. Now, if you get the cheapest way to do it is to get either play bark for children's areas, or bark that you get at the garden centres for putting on your paths and things like that. Decorative bark chips, yeah. They're all far cheaper than buying a reptile brand one or something like that. They're just a waste of money. They're just so expensive. So there's plenty of cheap ways in which you can do all of this and maintain. So try and think about the substrate that you've got, how that substrate is going to behave in the enclosure that you choose to use. And then from there, you can then learn how much water you need. But if you're on any of these types of things, I would try and stay away from spraying.
And no single spider likes a shower.
No, they're not really keen on getting showered. So try and stay away from the spraying. It is difficult. Some things like jumping spiders, stuff like that, Celadonia to some extent, all the little things like that, and some of the very small avics, especially when they're young, they can often benefit from a very slight mist to actually drink from, and they will drink driplets of water off of the wood or the glass or the plastic or whatever they're on.
But you don't spray the spider.
No, you don't want to spray the actual spider, and you don't really want to spray the whole enclosure. If you're going to do that, the best way to do that is to use one of the very fine sprays. I haven't got one here in a minute, but you can get very fine ones, and some of them are very small. They're tiny little things, and they literally just give a little puff of moisture, and that is it. That's enough. You don't want to be soaking everything. Try and keep in mind that you want to try and keep things as dry as possible, but with that humidity. And if you're going to use it, get it out of your soil, not by spraying it on top of everything. Right, I think so. About sort of covers it, I think.
It may prompt some questions.
Yeah,
Like
if
that.
anyone's got any questions about it, or they're not sure about what we've sort of mentioned here today. I must add though, this is all things that I do here, and I've got on really well with, and it's worked for me. The most important thing when you're reading the husbandry sheets and they're telling you about watering and spraying and all these different things, is to take that advice, look at it, and then think about how it's going to behave in your particular environment. Yeah, in your enclosure, depending on what it is you're using. So it's pretty common sense. Some things sweat and hold on to things more, so that requires less water from you. And the stuff that dries out more, we either use that for drier species or we change the way we actually do our watering. Most of the dry stuff, we literally just overflow a water bowl, and that is enough. Look at about 10% of your overall area, get that nice and moist, that will do it. Same with the moss. You can even use really old dry moss. It doesn't have to be living moss. You can just have old dry moss and just put that in the side and soak your moss, and then that will go down into the soil. It will help lock that moisture in the soil as well, which will mean it will last longer, which means that you probably only need to soak it maybe once a week. It all depends on what you've got. In this kind of environment, we won't need to do it very often at all. We could get away with 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, depends on how much moisture we got in there. So bear it all in mind. Right. Well, if you've got any questions, stick them down in the comments. I hope this is useful. And again, the big thing to remember is when you're sourcing your information on the internet, please research the information that you're reading. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people, they try to help and what have you, but quite often the information is wrong or it's misconstrued. It's not given in the right way. So always check out the information that you're getting and make sure that it's valid. And if someone's telling you to change everything, look into what they're doing and how they're getting on, and if they're being successful in what they're doing, then by all means take on the advice that they're giving you.
If that's what they're doing at home.
Yeah, if that's what they're doing at home, So it's very, very important that you don't take someone's advice on face value. It's very, very important. Dig in a little bit, find out what they do, find out, if they're successful. Have they been keeping for a little while? Or, have they literally just got a spider like last week and now all of a sudden they're an expert and telling everyone how to do it? So just be careful. Research your research. Most important. Right then. Well, I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget, be calm, be gentle, and love your spider. And I'll see you all soon, guys.